My name is Rowan Pierce, Lieutenant Commander in the United States Navy. On my mother's 62nd birthday, between my brothers, aunts, cousins, and two family friends I couldn't even place, she lifted her champagne flute, locked eyes with me and said, "You should never have been born." The line cut through the room harder than any sonic boom. Forks hovered. A chair squeaked. My aunt's smile fell clean off her face. I didn't blink. Years in the cockpit teach you not to flinch when alarms start screaming. You run the checklist. So I did the same here. Shoulders back, breath steady, eyes level. If I reacted, she'd claim I misunderstood. That's always been her maneuver. Hit me in public, rewrite it in private. So I let the words smoke out the table until everyone had to breathe them. Truth? This wasn't new. Just the loudest version of a message I've heard my whole life. And while she thought tonight was her final word, I'd been waiting for this engagement like a scheduled sortie. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to speak one sentence that would make every face at that table drop, including hers. The night started like it always does. A cold text. 11:14 a.m. from my mother. No hello, no heart, not even punctuation beyond the order. Dinner 8 p.m. Don't be late. When I walked into her apartment, the air pressure changed. My brothers gave quick duty-grade hugs and retreated. Conversations clipped off the second I hit the kitchen doorway. Even the way they stood said I'd interrupted the briefing. What I didn't know then was that this dinner wouldn't just sting. It would blow something open we could never tape back together. Before I tell you exactly what happened after her toast, and the answer that made her wish she'd kept her glass down, tap subscribe so you don't miss the rest and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to see how far this flight path runs. Back to 11:14. I stared at the message, thumb hovering. I could have fired back, should I bring my own chair, or will there actually be a seat for me this time? Instead, I chose the safest reply, the kind you use with a temperamental tower when you just need clear runway. Confirmed. I'll be there. With my mother, every word is future ammo. The less I gave, the less she could twist. By evening, February wind cut through my coat as I stood outside her building, running my plan like a pre-flight. Polite greeting, minimal chatter, avoid hot topics. Get through dinner. The plan died the second I stepped in. The apartment was warm, the welcome wasn't. Adam and Nate met me at the door with hugs that were more form than feeling, brief, stiff, over. Laughter spilled from the kitchen, loud, easy, until I appeared in the doorway. It stopped mid-breath. Aunt Miriam bent over a bread basket like it required medical attention. A cousin suddenly discovered the fridge needed inspecting. My mother, Valerie, didn't glance up from the sink. Maybe I was imagining it, I told myself. But I've stood in this exact hallway too many times to misread the air. It's a wall you can feel even when no one says a word. I moved toward the hall to hang my coat. That's when I heard her, low, not low enough, floating over the counter. If I'm honest, having her was the biggest mistake of my life. The things I could have done if I didn't have to. A pot clattered, the rest blurred. I didn't need the end. I froze, eyes on the tile. Not from shock, I felt unwanted before, but from the ease of it. She said it like weather. Calm. Certain. As if it were a fact, not a choice. Kept still. Coat over my arm. Breath slow. No one knew I'd heard, and I wasn't going to give them that. Yet. We gathered at the table. I took the far end away from Valerie. I didn't want her close enough to read my face. Conversation ran smoothly around me. Vacation plans, promotions, gossip about a neighbor I'd never met. Every time I opened my mouth, someone cut across it. Nate once, Valerie twice. I smiled, sipped water, and logged each interruption like tally marks in my head. Other details stacked. My brothers in matching outfits for photos. Coordinated crystal at every setting, except mine. My glass was the old, mismatched one from the back of the cupboard. Tiny, deliberate things. In this family, nothing like that is accidental. When I finally caught Valerie's eyes, it wasn't anger I saw. Not even annoyance. It was colder. Calculated. She was holding something, waiting for the perfect release. Maximum force, maximum witnesses. I didn't know the shape yet. I could feel the timing. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of it. I almost welcomed it. Because whatever she planned to say, I wasn't letting it slide this time. By the time the food landed, the distance wasn't imagined. It was measurable in every glance, every half-swallowed sentence, every smile that vanished too fast. The seating was deliberate. Adam and Nate flanking Valerie, their wives beside them, cousins clustered at the far end. I was placed near the corner. Technically at the table, positioned just outside the conversation. From where I sat I could see everyone. Beside me the chair to my right stayed empty. An invisible line had been drawn. This is your boundary, Rowan. Don't cross it. First course hit the table and with it the usual current that never carries me. Remember that summer in Montauk? Adam laughed, fork aimed at Nate. Oh God, yes. Valerie jumped in before he'd finished. Lines they've rehearsed for years, each memory polished by retelling. I was there that summer. I opened my mouth to add one detail. Gone. Lena, my cousin, slid in with another story and my voice drowned under the tide. It wasn't just getting talked over. It was the way conversation curved around me on purpose. Water around a rock. Every time I leaned forward the flow shifted. Every time I reached for a thread it slipped. Aunt Miriam leaned toward Valerie and whispered. A quick flick of my mother's eyes to me, then a tight smile and a small shake of her head. Message received. Whatever was suggested didn't include me. Hands folded in my lap, I let my smile do the work my voice wasn't allowed. I've lived in rooms like this my whole life. It's not silence that cuts, it's the performance of politeness. Making it look like you're welcome while ensuring you never belong. When the conversation finally faced my way it was by accident. Harper, Nate's wife, mentioned a coworker who knew me. Oh, Rowan, she brightened, turning to me for the first time all night. He said you're working on something big? I nodded. Yeah, I've been. Let's not get into that now, Valerie said lightly, hand flicking as if I was about to launch a political debate, not a two-sentence update. Spotlight gone. The corner of my mouth twitched. Body bracing for an impact it knows is coming. By plate clear, the burn in my chest wasn't anger. Harper. The alertness you get when you realize you're not just outside the room, you're the target of something being built. Everyone orbited Valerie's cues. No one would step in when she moved. That was fine. This time I wasn't counting on cover fire. I'd already decided I would speak. Not enough to survive the night, enough to change it. Second course was still in motion when it happened. I stood to grab water from the sideboard. Truth, I needed air. The table felt like a sealed room in midsummer. Heavy, stale, rehearsed smiles, measured laughs. The hallway light was softer. Kitchen voices separated into clean strands. Valerie's carried like it always does when she wants to be overheard by everyone except the subject. She's lucky I even invited her. You know how she gets, always turning things into drama. Sharp enough to pierce the calm I'd been holding since the door. She didn't need my name. The emphasis on lucky. The pause before invited. The implied generosity, crafting herself as the long-suffering, magnanimous mother and me as the ungrateful daughter. I went still, fingertips resting on the wood. Pulse up, not from surprise but from the precision. This was a narrative she'd been honing for years. I'd let it run long enough. From the kitchen Aunt Miriam's voice floated in, soft, almost hesitant. But she's your daughter, tonight's supposed to be. Valerie's laugh cut her off. Not warm. A short, dismissive exhale. More disbelief than joy. Don't start, Miriam. You have no idea what I've dealt with. The sacrifices I've made. The things I could have done with my life if I didn't have to. A pan scraped, the rest blurred. I already knew the ending. I took a slow sip from the glass I'd poured. Metallic, faintly bitter. Somehow fitting. There's a kind of cruelty that hits harder than a direct strike. Casual, practiced, delivered like a fact. She didn't even bother lowering her voice enough to spare me. Maybe she didn't care. Maybe she wanted me to hear it. Footsteps. I shifted, pretending to straighten a crooked frame. My cousin drew past with a steaming dish, eyes sliding past me like I was furniture. I followed seconds later. The table noise swelled with each step. By the time I sat, Valerie was back in her chair, a polite smile placed on her face like borrowed jewelry. Her eyes met mine for half a second, steady, unreadable. Gauging whether I'd heard. Measuring what I might do. I eased in. Plate full. Conversation flowing. Nate teasing Adam. Cousins laughing. Every word moved around me, never through me. I lifted my fork. Didn't eat. Let my thoughts drown the chatter. No one else knew what I'd just heard. I wasn't giving her the scene she wanted. She'd love an outburst, something to twist into a story about my instability. Instead, she just confirmed what I felt the moment I walked in. This wasn't a birthday. It wasn't even family. It was staging. Every glance, every subtle exclusion, every timed interruption. Rehearsal beats for a bigger moment. She intended to take center stage. That's fine. I can stand on it too. I speared a bite, forced a light, measured smile, and laughed with a joke at the far end of the table. Not because it was funny, but because cover and concealment matter before you execute a plan. She thought she was the only one preparing a performance. She'd learn otherwise. When the second course plates cleared, the room slipped into the easy chaos of a family meal. Overlapping talk, clinking cutlery, refills, comfort for everyone but me. From my chair it felt like watching the night through glass. Warmth visible. Laughter audible. None of it reaching. The seating didn't help. Adam on my left, torso angled toward Valerie, body language shutting the door without saying a word. Across from me, Lena offered polite smiles whenever our eyes met, never once starting a thread. Every time I found an opening it sealed before I got a boot through. Copy. Understood. Rules of engagement just changed. On my right the chair stayed empty, the only unoccupied seat at the table. Not an accident. Nothing in this family ever is. Adam and Nate were mid-Montauk rerun. Oh God, do you remember that storm? Nate laughed. How could I forget? Adam said. Thought the house would blow off its stilts. I was there that summer. I could have told them how the wind hammered the windows, how we dragged blankets into the living room and slept in a pile to pretend we weren't scared. I opened my mouth. Valerie slid in with her own version and the story rolled past like a convoy. Kept happening. A cousin mentioned a restaurant I'd eaten at last week. Aunt Miriam brought up an exhibit I'd already seen. Each time I leaned forward, the conversation darted away, like a school of fish avoiding a shadow. I wasn't dangerous. I was inconvenient. Including me required effort, and effort wasn't on tonight's menu. Miriam passed the bread with a smile that never touched her eyes. Everything okay, Rowan? Light voice. Careful tone. Fine, thanks. I passed the basket on. No follow-up. A little later Harper tried, again. A colleague said you're working on something big. What is it? Yes, I've been. Let's not get into that now. Valerie cut, laugh light, edge sharp, as if my job were indecent dinner talk. The table turned, obedient as a formation on her command. Harper shot me an apologetic look and let it go. It wasn't random rudeness. It was choreography. Valerie set the rhythm. Everyone matched the beat. She had an audience and I was the act she was building toward. Kept small, contained, invisible until she chose the reveal. Halfway through the main I caught her watching me. No smile. No frown. Calm anticipation. The look of someone timing a strike for maximum witnesses. I sipped water, held eye contact until she glanced away. Fine. Make your move. She wasn't the only one watching. It came in the safe lull between main and dessert. Shoulders loose, glasses refilled, lighter talk drifting. Plates cleared, coffee poured. Nate told a road trip horror story, we all laughed, even me. Then Adam pivoted, voice just loud enough to pull the table. Remember how Rowan used to be on every road trip? Halfway through she'd call Dad crying because she'd run out of money. A beat, people deciding if this was a joke or a jab. Then laughter. Hesitant first, louder next. Even Miriam covered her mouth halfway through like she knew better and did it anyway. I smiled, the way you do here to prove you can take it. Inside the weight landed different. The story wasn't even true. I'd asked Dad for help once. 19 broke halfway across the country in a dying car. Adam had turned a single call into my defining trait. That's right, Valerie chimed in, tone airy, eyes locked on me. Some things never change. 5 words. Loaded. Not about a road trip. About who she insists I am and will always be. The table erupted again. Louder now, confidence restored. First blow delivered. Not the knockout, not yet. A public jab dressed as a joke. Framed so any response makes me humorless, oversensitive, impossible. I let coffee heat my throat and rechecked the decision I made before I ever rang the bell. They don't get an easy win. The chatter drifted back to travel and work, but the current shifted. Side glances slid my way, checking if I'd bite. I kept my face calm, faintly amused, mind razor clear. Her one sentence told me everything. She wasn't waiting anymore. She was warming up, testing the room, mapping how far she could push without losing it. I remembered the hallway. She's lucky I even invited her. The pieces locked. She was building a narrative brick by brick and guiding the table to see me exactly how she wanted. That was fine. I had my own script, and when she opened the door I'd walk straight through it. It wasn't enough for Valerie to believe I was a mistake. She needed the room to believe it too. Dessert came out and she steered the talk toward family traditions. Remember Thanksgiving at Grandma's? She smiled at my brothers. It was so much easier back then. Everyone knew their place. Soft thud to the sternum. She didn't look at me. He didn't have to. I took a bite, sweet, heavy, and let the silence between us grow. She was baiting for a reaction, building toward the moment where she'd have every set of eyes before dropping her line. I met her glance down the table just as she looked away. The real hit hadn't landed yet. Coffee circled. Cups clinked. Then she chose the opening. She set her cup down with a delicate tap, leaned back and put on that careful hostess smile she uses when she wants cruelty to sound generous. You know, Rowan, I have to say you've always been resilient. The word hovered, heavy with the pause she gave it. In Valerie's mouth, resilient isn't a compliment. It's a pat on the head for someone who keeps surviving problems they brought on themselves. You've been through so much, she went on, gaze pinned to mine, and somehow you keep going. That's admirable. A few polite murmurs. A vague smile from Aunt Miriam. My cousins nodded. My brothers stared at their plates. From anyone else it might have been harmless. From her, you keep going translated to, I don't know how you've scraped by this long. Thank you, I said, calm voice, neutral face. Resilient isn't the worst name she's pinned on me. I wasn't giving her the tremor she wanted. She tilted her head, a small tell, disappointed she hadn't found a crack. She pivoted to the table. I mean, remember the whole apartment mess last year? Tone bright like a funny anecdote. Most people would have fallen apart, but not Rowan. She just survived it. I slid my way. They didn't know details, just enough to imagine a half-embarrassing drama with me at the center. In her version, the eviction notice wasn't a corrupt landlord. It was proof I can't manage my own life. Months of careful problem-solving shrunk to a personality quirk. Stubborn survival. Conversation kept moving, but she watched me from the corner of her eye, circling, probing, mapping how far she could push without losing the room. I knew the tactic. She used it when I was a teenager. Chip away in public until the final blow feels inevitable. By now the pattern was clean on the radar. The cold invite, the chilly reception, the hallway line. She's lucky I even invited her. The travel money jab, and now the poisoned compliment. She was assembling crown jewel territory. The remark the family would carry home. Hands folded, posture easy. On the surface I was just another guest finishing dessert. Inside I logged every beat like a flight recorder. She thought she was building the stage. She didn't know I was setting my own. When she finally glanced away, satisfied she'd planted the narrative, I let my eyes rest on her a heartbeat longer. If she wanted to see resilience, I'd give her something she couldn't laugh off. Time to go off script. When her moment finally came, I wasn't going to flinch. I was going to torch the playbook. The table had settled into that soft post-dessert quiet. Half-empty wine glasses, forks idle, small clusters of chatter. Valerie straightened in her chair, a tiny movement that pulled the room into orbit. Side conversations faded without being asked. She lifted her glass. I just want to say how wonderful it is to have everyone here tonight. A polite murmur. Nods to Adam, to Nate, to the aunts and cousins. Then her eyes found me. And of course, Rowan. He tasted my name. You're something else. A lean-in ripple traveled the table. You've always been different from the rest of us. Challenging. Unpredictable. And sometimes, she let the gap stretch, you've made things harder than they needed to be. Her gaze never left mine. I suppose that's just who you are. A tilt of the head, voice dropping intimate. If I'm being honest, I wish you'd never been born. No crash. No shout. The words slid in like a blade between ribs. Silence thickened, pressed against walls, settled over plates. Aunt Miriam stared at her lap. Adam's jaw tightened a fraction. Nate reached for his glass and didn't drink. I held her eyes. Hands folded. Still as a statue. I let the quiet expand until the discomfort migrated off me and onto everyone else. No regret in her face. Just the lift of a chin that said she'd finally delivered the line she'd been polishing all night. I could have laughed, cried, stood up and left. None of that would be enough. She wanted a scene she could later recast as Rowan overreacting. Not tonight. I took a slow sip of water, set the glass down and said evenly, "Interesting choice for a birthday toast." The room tightened. Chairs creaked. Something flickered in her eyes. Not fear exactly, but caution. I wasn't playing my old role. I was holding the silence hostage. We stayed locked there, mother and daughter across a table that felt like a runway at night. This was the opening she'd engineered. She hadn't noticed it had become mine. I didn't answer right away. Not for lack of words. I had plenty. I wanted her to sit in it. The quiet lay across the table like glass. No clatter of cutlery. Those with dessert left stared at their plates. I let my gaze move unhurried from face to face. Brothers, aunts, cousins, each one dropping their eyes when I reached them. Valerie alone held steady, but there was a tiny twitch at the corner of her mouth, the urge to fill the space I refused to surrender. I leaned in just enough to shorten the distance. People reveal themselves when you take away their metronome. Valerie runs every room by tempo, quick to keep the upper hand, slow to make the audience lean. With me saying nothing, she had nowhere to go. A throat cleared. Adam shifted, thought better of speaking. The air pressed warm against my skin. When I finally broke it, I didn't raise my voice. "That's quite a sentiment to share in front of your family," I said, as level as if we were discussing weather. The tension sharpened. Someone coughed. She tipped her head, feigning innocence. "It's just the truth," Valerie said, casual, flat, the way she's delivered 1,000 small cuts. I gave her a slow nod as if I were weighing it. "Funny thing about truth at a family table," I said. "It dresses up as honesty when it's really a story you're staging." I let that hang. Her fingers tightened a shade around the stem of her glass, hairline crack in the act. "You've been building a narrative tonight," I continued, voice even, briefing room calm. "I'm the problem. The burden. The mistake. Smart tactic. Chip away in small jokes and sweetly barbed compliments so the finale lands clean." A chair creaked. Aunt Miriam's eyes flicked between us. "But if we're doing truth, then the room deserves the rest of it." I leaned back, conceding space she hadn't earned. For the first time all night, the current of attention shifted off her and onto me. I didn't rush. Timing is a weapon. She'd used it. I would too. "I've stayed quiet for years," I said, softer now. "Out of respect. But respect runs in two directions. Tonight you made it clear which way yours goes. So here's my side." I watched her eyes narrow the way they do when she thinks she's about to outflank me. "Last Thanksgiving," I said, "you told everyone I forgot the pies." A few heads turned. "You also told me the day before not to bring anything because you'd already ordered them. Then you got a laugh at my expense." No heat, just facts. Her smile didn't vanish, but it wobbled. "And moving day? You told the family I refused help. In reality, no one called. Later you told my brothers I didn't want the family involved." I let my gaze sweep the table. No one spoke. Not because they doubted me, because they didn't. "This is the pattern," I said. "Small edits. Tiny omissions. Always public. Repeat it often enough and it becomes the version people remember." Her knuckles blanched around the glass. "And since we're airing honesty, while I was in the hall getting water, I heard you tell Aunt Miriam I was lucky to be here, that your life would have been better without me." A fork paused halfway up, a glass froze inches from a mouth. Subtle but enough. "I've spent years wondering if I was too much," I said. "Tried to contort myself into the daughter you'd proudly claim. But this was never about me. It's about you needing a decoy when you don't want to look in a mirror." She inhaled to cut me off. I didn't give her the window. "You've turned my life into a cautionary tale. Wrapped cruelty in just being honest." I smiled through jokes, swallowed the digs and let you have the last word. I drew a breath, measured, steady, the way we practice under G-load. "That ends tonight." The air got heavier. No one reached for a refill. Even the ones who laughed earlier sat very still. "You wanted to make me small," I said quietly. "The thing about pushing someone into a corner is that sometimes they stop trying to slip past you. Sometimes they push back." A clock ticked in the hallway. Valerie's posture stayed pristine. Her eyes sharpened like she was bracing for recoil. You've had your say, I finished, tone-controlled, officer clean. And for most of my life you've had the last word. You've scripted how this family sees me. I leaned in, voice dropping to a command whisper. Tonight I'm taking calms. You've chosen the stories they hear, I said. And you've decided over and over that your truth is the only one that matters. Valerie's lips pressed into a thin line. First wobble of the night. But here's something you never controlled, I went on, elbows on the table, eyes locked on hers. How I see you. And after tonight I'm done keeping that to myself. You say I should never have been born. If that's true, then every sacrifice you brag about was for nothing. Every sigh, every complaint, meaningless because you never wanted me in the first place. And yet here I am. Still here. Still living a life you don't get to narrate. Her fingers had a death grip on the stem of her glass. For a second I thought it might snap. You wanted me small, I said, voice low and steady. All you did was show everyone here how small you have to be to treat your daughter that way. Silence. Heads down. No one brave enough to look straight at either of us. I pushed my chair back. Slow. Deliberate. Napkin folded. Shoulders square. Parade rest without the uniform. High truth, I said. If family means accepting I'm a mistake, I'll make it easy. You don't have to claim me anymore. I let that settle across the table like dust after a blast. I've carried your version of me long enough. From now on I carry my own without you. I met her eyes one last time. You don't get the last word anymore. I do. Coat on. Hallway. Door. I didn't look back. The air outside hit cold and clean. The hum of conversation behind me shrank to a muffled blur. Background noise, nothing more. My pulse finally stepped down from combat pace to a calm march. I hadn't gone there planning to cut ties, but that's what happened. The ground under my feet felt steadier for it. I walked. No destination. Just New York being New York. Tires hissing on wet asphalt. A burst of laughter from a couple sharing an umbrella. Steam lifting from a subway grate like breath in winter. I let the city's noise replace her voice in my head. I passed a deli with a flickering neon sign, the corner bookstore I used to duck into after work before I stopped making time for myself. Somewhere between the two, the weight in my chest loosened. Not joy. Not yet. Just lighter. Elevator down to street level had felt like exhaling. This walk felt like oxygen. Up there, silence was a weapon. Out here was freedom. I stopped at a crosswalk and caught my reflection in a dark shop window. Collar up, hair a little undone, eyes clear. Not searching for damage. Not finding any. Old habit kicked in. After action review. Pick clean. Mission. Hold the line. Refuse the script. Actions. Stayed calm. Spoke facts. Took comms. Outcome. Boundary set. Contact severed. Next steps. Protect peace. No re-engagement without respect. I slid my hands deeper into my pockets and kept moving. Tonight I didn't win an argument. I ended a war I never started. And for the first time in years I could hear my own cadence. Steady, measured, mine. The cold stung my cheeks and I welcomed it. It kept me present. In my body in this moment. Halfway between 7th and 8th, waiting at the crosswalk, I realized I wasn't replaying what happened. I was cataloging what won't happen anymore. No more showing up already braced for impact. No more weighing every word like it might be used as evidence. No more pulling up a chair where I'm merely tolerated. That didn't feel like loss. It felt like dropping a rucksack I'd carried so long I forgot it was there. The light changed. I crossed, city glow slick on the pavement. In my mind, the scene upstairs flickered. Her line, my response, the stillness that followed. For years I'd pictured this ending in shouting. Instead it ended with control. Mine. That was the real win. Not the speech, the stance. I turned down a quiet side street where you can hear your own footsteps. Frost glittered on parked cars. A siren rose and fell in the distance. I thought about tomorrow's version of the story. Calls she'll make, spins she'll try. She can frame it however she wants, but she won't forget the look in my eyes when I stood. This time she didn't walk away thinking she'd won. By the time I stopped I was outside my building. Muscle memory had guided me home. Keys cold in my hand. Door open. My place wrapped around me with its familiar, honest air. Coat on the hook. Stillness. This quiet wasn't empty. It was earned. I knew how they'd tell it. I also knew the truth. I didn't lose a family. They lost the right to keep shrinking me. I made tea and sat on the couch while the city murmured through the windows. Phone face down on the table. I didn't touch it. The messages could wait, tomorrow or never. I sat with the space. Not brittle silence, the kind that presses on your chest, but open space you can breathe in. I thought about the years I'd tried to fit the mold she built for me. Smaller, quieter, easier to control. I'd twisted myself to avoid nights like this. But nights like this were inevitable because her story about me was never going to change. Accepting that was the hardest and most freeing part. People talk about cutting ties like it's anger, like you torch the bridge and cheer. Sitting there, I felt none of that. No revenge plan. No victory dance. I just didn't want to keep showing up to places where my worth needed a permission slip. Maybe the real power isn't winning the argument. It's refusing to sit at that table at all. Tea finished. Cup rinsed. Lights off. Street lamps painted the room in soft amber. I stood by the window and looked out at a city that's seen my best and my worst. This is mine, I thought. My space. My pace. My life. No permission required. I went to bed without checking the phone. Whatever waited there could wait. I didn't owe anyone an answer. One final thought landed like setting down gear after a long march. I didn't walk away because I hated her. I walked away because I love myself more. I'm not keeping the anger. I'm keeping the distance and the peace. If you've had to step back from a toxic family dynamic, tell me how you did it. I read every comment. And drop where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.